Hi folks, in this lesson we're going to look at the select component, which is used to present a list from which one or more selections can be made. First of all, let's import the select module from material into our own app module. And now let's add a select box to our forms component. We use a mat card again for layout purposes, and the select box is one of the elements supported by the mat form field, so we can make use of this again as well. The select box is built from a mat selector element containing one or more mat option elements. The mat select element has the placeholder property to give the field a label, such as with regular inputs. We can use an ng4 to create the right number of options inside the mat select for us. We'll add this to the component in just a moment. The mat option also has a value property set to the value property of each object in the options array, and the value used to display in the UI is a property of the same object called viewValue, which is a common name for this value. So now let's add the options array to the forms component. So options will be a public property containing an array of objects. We can use the ng on init to populate this array. So let's just add 3 options, and that should be all we need to do. So let's take a look in the browser. So the appearance of the select box matches that of other material form components like inputs, and if we click anywhere on the placeholder value here or the icon, then we see the list of options, and this appears in an overlay styled just like a menu. So now let's look at some features of the select box that we can configure. So we can disable either the whole list or individual options within the list using the disabled property. Let's link this to another property in the options objects. And now we can see that option 2 is disabled and it can't be selected. We can also use the disabled property on the whole list if we want to disable all of the options at the same time. And then you won't even be able to open the menu for the select box at all. So by default, the select is a single select box. We can only select one value at a time. The component does also support multi-select mode, which we can enable with the multiple property. So now when we expand the select box, we can see the list has changed slightly and each of the options now has this tick box. And we can use that to select multiple options. And now the label is updated to show both of these selected options. That's fine in this case because there are only 2 items available to be selected and they fit in the label together without any issues. So let's just go back and remove the disabled property from the second object in our options array. And let's go back again. And now let's select all 3 options. And now we can see that it looks a bit untidy. So all of the options don't now fit in the label, and we've got this CSS ellipsis that's been added and it's left an orphaned O, and it just looks a bit untidy. So in this scenario, we may want to customize how the label is displayed. We can do that using the mat select trigger element. So we've added a mat-select-trigger element, and inside this we're using an interpolation binding on select.selected.length. So a multiple select list will have a selected array, and we want to display the length of that array, but we're referencing this select object, which doesn't yet exist. So to make that exist, we can just add a template reference variable to the mat-select element. So let's go back to the browser now, and let's open up the list. Let's select all three elements once again. And now we can see that the number of items is selected instead of the previously clumsy looking list of all selected options. So obviously we can customize that. We could say 3 items selected or something like that. But just to illustrate how this is done, I think we can just display the number of selected items here. Another feature that the select component supports is creating option groups, which visually separates items inside the menu. Let's add one now. So we use the mat-opt group element, and we can give the option group a header using the label property, and we can also use mat option elements inside this mat opt group element. And again, we can set a value and a label for each option. In this case, we're just hard coding them. We're not linking them back to any properties in the class, but the effect should be the same. So let's see how this looks in the browser now. So we can see that we have this group down at the bottom here. It still supports multiple selections, and we get this nice header, and the two sets of options are now nicely visually separated. Our custom display of the number of items selected still works with these option groups as well. It's all just pretty seamless and flawless. So the most important aspect of working with the select box is how we get these selected values. So we saw how we can do this in the template using a simple template reference variable, but the select component is flexible, and there are numerous ways to get the selected value or values from the select in our component class as well. A common way is to use one of the select component's output events, such as the selection change event. And again, for the purposes of this example, we can just log the event out to the console. So each time we select an option, it should trigger this event. And it's a mat-select change event object. And again, we get a reference to the component that triggered the event, in this case, the mat-select element. And we get a value here, which is an array of the selected options. So we set the values to numbers. So option 3 has the value 3, and that is what we see in the array. If we select another one now, we see 3 and 4, and it looks like one is a string and one is a number. We could fix that so that both of them are strings, or we could parse out the number from the string in the class if we wanted to. But what I really wanted to show was how we can get these selected elements. And that is a common way to do it using the selection change output event. One thing to note is that this value array is sorted for us automatically. We don't have to do that ourselves manually. And this is supported in either template-driven or reactive forms. So in this lesson we focused on the select component and saw how we can easily implement a beautifully styled and highly configurable custom select box. We learned that we can create a simple select box using the mat-select and mat-option custom elements, and we saw how we can customize the trigger label using the mat-select-trigger element. We also saw how we can organize the different options into groups using a mat-opt group custom element. Lastly, we saw that we can bind to the selection change output event in order to react to selections being made. Thanks for watching.